Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Empowering Communities, Ambassadors of Digital Equity for Student Success, which is inspired by the NPSS Digital Equity Toolkit. Today's webinar will go as follows: an introduction to our facilitators, an overview of the NPSS Digital Equity Toolkit, an introduction to our panelists, questions for our panelists, Q&A, and closing. Today's webinar will include a Q&A segment, so please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A chat at any point during the webinar. You can find the Q&A button between the chat and participants icon in the toolbar below. Now we'll have a brief introduction of our facilitators. This webinar is supported by the 3 projects under Innovate EDU: Project Unicorn, NPSS, and EALA. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Erin Faye Caesar, and I am the Project Associate of Project Unicorn. Project Unicorn is an effort to improve data interoperability in K-12 education. The project is a coalition of national education organizations that aim to create a community of innovators who make the broader case for secure interoperability by determining shared priorities, collaborating with school systems and vendors to understand its importance, and creating a demand-side push for interoperability through partnerships. I will now hand it over to Caitlin.
Thanks so much, Erin Faye. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm Caitlin Amaral. I work for an organization called City Year, which is an education nonprofit powered by AmeriCorps that's dedicated to students and school success. And City Year is also proud to be one of the founding organizations of the National Partnership for Student Success. And I'm also grateful to sit on the team there. The NPSS is a public-private partnership between the Biden-Harris administration, led by the U.S. Department of Education and AmeriCorps, and leading national education and youth-serving organizations across the country, with the goal of getting 250,000 additional adults to raise their hands to serve as tutors, mentors, student success coaches, post-secondary transition coaches, and wraparound student support coordinators to help young people recover from the impacts of the pandemic and thrive. And I'm excited to turn it over to Jackie to introduce herself next.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. My name is Jackie Keenan. I work for the Educating All Learners Alliance, also known as EALA. EALA is a coalition of over 140 nonprofit organizations building capacity for the special education field through leadership and community building initiatives, along with resource sharing. So we have several different types of resource libraries on our website, free resources to support caregivers, teachers, and also administrators supporting students with learning differences and disabilities. I am now going to introduce today's panelists. So joining us today, thank you so very much, Latasha Golden from City Year Incorporated, Agnes Schultz from the YMCA Metropolitan Chicago, and we also have Chase Turner of the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. Thank you so much again for joining us in our conversation today. I am now going to turn it back over to Caitlin from NPSS to give a little bit of background on the Digital Equity Toolkit.
Thank you so much, Jackie. So I mentioned earlier that the goal of the NPSS is to connect more students to holistic evidence-based supports by encouraging additional adults to serve young people in their communities in those 5 roles that you see on the slide here. The day-to-day part run by the NPSS Hub, which is situated at Johns Hopkins Everyone Graduate Center. On this next slide, you'll see that the Hub is a cross-sector connector focused on helping national, state, and local efforts that bring evidence-based student supports where they're needed the most. And as part of this work, the Hub also leads a handful of working groups brought together based on the interests of our 160 plus and growing supporting champions that work collaboratively to solve problems or address challenges that are relevant to multiple members of the coalition. And as digital equity is such a critical enabler of student success, the Digital Equity Working Group, and I see some members of which are here in the chat today, was created to help amplify the importance of digital equity and inclusion and demonstrate how folks in these 5 NPSS-aligned roles can support the work to ensure that all individuals and communities, including those furthest from opportunity, have access to and use of information and communication technologies. So To do so, the goal of our cross-sector working group is to provide resources, information, and make connections for communities and youth-serving organizations to support closing the digital divide. So we were really excited to release our digital equity toolkit earlier this fall, which we'll see on this next slide coming up here. And in the toolkit, which we can also share a link to in the chat, folks will find a concrete definition of digital equity, how the NPSS and its champions can support digital inclusion, and the value of the digital navigator role, and a host of resources to support digital equity and inclusion in communities across the country. So the goal is to give people a really concrete resource and examples to increase digital inclusion in their communities. And we're particularly excited about the Bright Spot section that outlines some of the work already being done in communities across the country and lifts up in particular the work of today's panelists and their organizations as real examples of work being done in neighborhoods that impact children and families in real and impactful ways. So the goal of the toolkit is not to have answers for every digital equity question, but rather to give people real ways they can bring awareness around the issue of digital equity and provide resources and tools for people to use today and tomorrow to begin addressing this issue. So we hope folks will check it out. And if that work interests you, you'll see a number of ways that you can engage with us on this next slide. You can apply to be a supporting champion, request no-cost technical assistance, subscribe to our NPSS newsletter, or visit our website for more information and resources. And of course, would love to invite folks to join us in this work and join our working group. And you can express your interest and reach out to me with any questions or a desire to join our cause by emailing me directly. I'm at cameral@cityyear.org. I'll drop that in the chat for folks as well. But that's it for me. I'd love to turn it back over to our facilitators so we can dive into conversation with our panelists.
Awesome. Thank you, Caitlin. We've put the link for the toolkit in the chat for anyone who wants to read more about it. Now we'll have our panelists formally introduce themselves and their organizations. Again, feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A chat between this webinar, and they will be posed to our panelists at the end. We will start with Latasha Golden.
Hello, everyone. My name is Latasha Golden, and I'm very excited to be with you all today. I proudly serve as the Senior Director of Student Experience at City Year. At City Year, we partner with schools and school districts across the U.S. to provide and create positive learning environments that benefit the entire school and the surrounding community. Our City Year AmeriCorps members serve as student success coaches, and they support the academic and social emotional development, growth, and success of our students that are in systematically under-resourced schools, while also cultivating their agency and skills to be learners and leaders in their communities and in their future careers. Now I'll pass it to the next panelist to introduce themselves.
Thank you so much, Latasha. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Agnes Schultz, and I work as the Vice President of Community Innovation and Impact at the YMCA of Metropolitan Chicago. Coming at you from Chicago, Illinois, but we serve all of Chicagoland and our neighboring states. So at the YMCA of Metropolitan Chicago, we act as a community hub, working to strengthen our communities by connecting all people to their purpose potential in each other. I'm very excited to be here today, and I'll pass it over to the next panelist, Chase Turner.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, based upon where you are. I am Chase Turner, Senior Director, Youth Development, Adoption, and essentially my team and our role is about change management throughout the Youth Development Department and everything that then touches our youth at our 5,000 plus clubs. Previous to that, I worked in the realm of digital space for Boys and Girls Club, reflecting the products and the systems that go out to our youth and also our staff at clubs. And we have over 5,000 clubs now. Agnes, we just opened up our 5,000th club in Elgin, Illinois earlier this year. So very proud and very excited to be able to serve our youth across the country and across the globe with our military installations.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Latasha, Agnes, and Chase, for sharing a little bit about yourselves and your organizations. We are very excited to have you all here today. With that being said, we are going to jump right into the panel and get started with our first question. And again, we have Aurora also in the chat from EALA, reminding folks to, utilize the Q&A feature. And also she is putting some links in there as well, if you'd like to check out anything that we have spoken about so far. So my first question for the panel is, how does digital equity show up in your efforts within your organization? And if someone would like to go first, I will pass it over to you, or I can also select someone.
I'll go ahead and go first.
Thank you, Latasha.
Yeah, at City Year, our mission is to advance educational equity by supporting students furthest from opportunity. And educational equity includes digital equity. And so as education evolves and includes more opportunities for digital inclusion, then we have to think critically about digital literacy, access to technology, and digital citizenship for our students. And the toolkit enables our student success coaches and our AmeriCorps members to do just that.
I'll go ahead and go next. At the YMCA of Metropolitan Chicago, digital equity shows up in really three ways. So three arms of the portfolio include our bilingual community help desk. So we service all of Chicagoland with any tech needs, setting up individual appointments, or if we can help support via email or phone as well. We also have 6 tech hubs located throughout the city of Chicago. And in those tech hubs, we have a digital navigator on staff during all open hours. So those are free and open to the public. We see people coming in from the community with all sorts of needs, from helping to support job application, placement, and resume building, to just basic digital literacy skills. And, how do I sign up? How do I get an email address, right? So we're really there to host workshops and help support one-on-one with any needs coming in. And then the third arm of our portfolio is what I call our digital community navigator. So our digital navigators that go outside of our 4 walls into communities where we don't have a brick and mortar location, and help to support those digital needs in those communities. So the 3 ways that the YMCA of Metro Chicago shows up.
And I'll just chime in on the backside. So I work for the National Office of Boys and Girls Club. And so with that, we are often partnering with our clubs to try to figure out what are the best ways to engage our youth in digital equity opportunities, whether that be through funder relations, helping us provide laptops or even Wi-Fi hotspots for our youth across the country. This was something that was huge for us during the pandemic, making sure that everyone had access to hotspots. And then now, as we move into 2024, we've made some great partnerships with different corporations for communication. And what I mean by that is that many of our clubs now have centers or hubs that are sponsored, that have digital technology and laptops and computers, as well as free Wi-Fi, not just for the youth, but for their parents if they were to come in as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Chase. On to our next question. How have you thought about integrating the role of the digital navigator in your organization's programs? And we'll start off with Latasha.
Thank you, Erin. And so I mentioned already that at City Year, AmeriCorps members are considered student success coaches, and they are also digital navigators in the way that they fold in and support students in schools. But when I think about how they serve as digital navigators and how it's incorporated into our programs, I think about it through the context of the entire student's experience with City Year. When we talk about the student's experience at City Year, we're talking about the ways that students are heard, engaged, and empowered through the implementation of our evidence-based whole school, whole child model. We found that when students are deeply engaged in their learning and when they have the opportunities to exercise their agency in their educational experiences, both with peer-to-peer learning and digitally, then they're able to meaningfully contribute to their community and their school community. And so digital navigation for our core members looks like student engagement, looks like student voice, looks like student leadership in diverse ways. And so that's how we've kind of folded in that digital navigator role into our programs.
Awesome. Agnes, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I'll share a little. I mentioned at the Y we have both inside our four walls and outside our four walls digital navigators. We were made up of about 11 total staff members in that position, and really our navigators have been acting as trusted resources in the community, both programmatically and for any resource need. And so when folks come either into our center to use our tech hub spaces or, are engaged outside of our four walls, we're doing a number of things from hosting STEAM workshops or clubs to after school tech access, where most of our young people don't have access at home. So coming into our buildings to utilize our tech hubs and then supporting with homework help needs or any other needs that they might be navigating. We've also done a number of efforts with our local colleges and in doing application and financial assistance support. And then I mentioned earlier that job search and application and placement. So helping to get both our young people and our other community members ready, even for a Zoom call, which are the way of interviews these days. And so being able to practice in our spaces with them and then making sure they have a quiet, comfortable space to then take that interview. And then lastly, I'll say a lot of public benefit enrollment and other resource needs. So as we look at not just the digital equity needs, but also food support needs, other health equity needs. Again, the vast number of public benefit. If you don't have a device at home or access to internet or the knowledge to use them, really welcoming people into our spaces to help support them through what usually is a pretty long process of application or enrollment. So.
And just to follow up, what we've done is been able to provide some training and resources to our staff on different programs such as Passport to Manhood, Smart Girls, and now our newest program, Journeys, which built into each one of those is technology-based education. How do we start preparing our young men and young women and they for the opportunities and the experiences that they will have outside of our four walls or online? And again, through our workforce department, we have some really great relationships. Don't necessarily want to specifically name anyone here, but with that being said, what we do with those corporations that we partner with are be able to provide resources as far as resume building, interviewing for jobs, and then that is all connected through attending the Boys and Girls Club. They have those opportunities to interview and then be hired for some of the companies that we work with.
Awesome. So it really sounds like the three of your organizations are really making a stride in centering digital equity around their community. And it's really important work that you're all doing. Our next question, I am going to kick it over to Chase. The digital equity toolkit is just, one piece of the puzzle. How else is your organization creating experiences to foster digital equity amongst youth? And also, two-parter, provide opportunities outside of your centers for these folks as well.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Jackie. One of the pieces that is really big for us is myfuture.net. Simply the word myfuture.net. I think we're going to put it in the chat box. With that being said, that is our space for Boys and Girls Club members and youth around the world. You don't necessarily need to be a member of the Boys and Girls Club to access My Future. And it has over 500 activities that are based in STEM, arts, education, sports, esports, and more. And those are things that can either be led by the youth themselves, but if they are working with an instructor, a teacher, a club professional, they can certainly go through the step-by-steps and gain new knowledge on, for an example, like I said, a STEM project or doing Scratch. One of the newest entities that we've added to My Future is our virtual club, not to be confused with attending a virtual club and not being in person somewhere, but our virtual club is a space where many of our club staff and youth that attend clubs have created over 900 certified videos. And when I say certified, they've been reviewed by our safety team. They've been reviewed by our youth development team. And again, a lot of times youth want to hear from people that look like them, or they want to hear from somebody that is in a safe space, such as a Boys and Girls Club, that will walk them through how to do shoot a basketball, for an example, or how to do a cooking session. We have one that's up recently now, making Christmas holiday cookies. And all of that is accessible on My Future. And with that, we have over 900 5 to 10 minute videos that are there. And again, you're easily able to go on and sign up for a free account. If you were a Boys and Girls Club member, they can also participate in contests that provide enrichment, such as laptops or tablets, those sorts of things.
Awesome. Thank you, Chase. And Latasha or Agnes, that was a long question, so I will repeat it again. How else does your organization create experiences to foster digital equity amongst youth and provide opportunities outside of your centers?
I'll share that at City Year, a lot of the students we serve, when we introduce them to digital literacy and digital citizenship, it's often for the first time, just gaining access to using computers, laptops, and the internet in new ways. And one of the activities that we leverage is Hour of Code. So last week was Computer Science Education Week, and our AmeriCorps members across our network leveraged an hour of code with students, and it's introducing students to using their computer in a new way, not just to write a paper for class or to search something, but to actually create and to be a creator. And for a lot of our teams in our schools, it's a launch point for what digital equity can look like, right? So if we think about what we hear 21st century skills or the careers that are going to be available to them once they graduate, learning how to code, learning about AI, learning how to create things, gives them the skills and agencies for those careers. It gets to open up doors to different careers other than being a doctor, lawyer, which is fine. Like being a doctor and lawyer is fine. But then also it just opens up their options and possibilities for what they can do and who they can be. So our AmeriCorps members, as student success coaches, but also as digital navigators, get to introduce their students to different ways through Hour of Code, through after school program, through different enrichment activities. That just opens up their horizons for different careers.
And I'll just add one more component that the Y is newly touching in, especially with our young people, is cyberbullying and ensuring that we are wrapping that into the conversation as we have the workshops, as we introduce new tech skills, partnering with other local organizations that are also working to educate people, young people, and parents, guardians also in awareness. So that one more piece of the digital equity space is not just teaching the skill set, but also ensuring that we're good global citizens and awareness around what we're posting and what our footprint looks like online.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Agnes. We're going to move into our last question. How can educators utilize the toolkit to inform their instruction? And I can have anyone volunteer to answer this question for us, or we can popcorn it.
I think the toolkit is a wonderful resource. So as you'll notice, all three of us, as far as panelists, are from different organizations, but we have very similar missions. And that is to certainly strategize and help make sure that our youth are prepared for the future. And so what I would say is, in using that toolkit, find what resources work well for you and in your instruction. As I mentioned, we have a free resource available to everyone, but if you are local to the YMCA of Metro Chicago or Metropolitan Chicago, I'm sure there's a wonderful resource that they can have there. If you're local to any one of our clubs, please come in, and we have those digital toolkits available to be able to have on our website and to use as a resource as well.
I also think we can leverage the toolkit even just for awareness, right? The digital divide is still exists so in existence. I mean, we're all doing a lot of work to help close that, but digital equity is a term that not everybody understands, and not everybody is involved with in their daily. So just using the toolkit to share among peers, among other colleagues, and spread that awareness that the divide is still very much in existence, and that we all have a part in playing to help close it.
I'll close by saying that I like to encourage folks to always anchor in creating positive experiences for students. And so if you're looking for ways to increase your students' willingness and desire to participate in their learning environment, to use their voice and their agency, and to be learners and leaders in their space, the digital toolkit is a great launch pad and starting point for that when it comes to educational equity. And I believe that educational equity and digital equity, which are tightly linked. They're not, you can't separate it. You can't separate digital equity from educational equity or health equity. And so when you think about all of those things in tandem, and you want to create a positive experience for your students, the toolkit is a good starting point.
Thank you so much for that, each of you. And I agree, Latasha, digital equity and educational equity are, digital equity is now a part of educational equity. Our world is evolving, and our ways of educating youth and adults is changing so rapidly. So we need to embrace that change. And I think that, the work that each of your organizations is doing is really is embracing that and is, taking it in stride. So thank you each for sharing a little bit of how your organizations are doing that. This is just, one piece of the puzzle, as we mentioned, and there's so much more that we can talk about, but I really appreciate your insights. So we are now going to move over to the Q&A portion. Aurora from the Educating All Learners Alliance is going to be kicking that off. So I am going to turn it over to her.
Hey, everybody, this is Aurora from the Educating All Learners Alliance. Excited to be here today. Thank you so much to the panelists and our attendees. So as I'm checking out the questions that have come through in the chat and the Q&A feature, also, if you're just tuning in, please feel free to jot your questions down using the Q&A feature, or if you throw it in the chat, I'll get to it too. Here's one. I'm sort of looking at things in terms of buckets, and I'm getting questions around what challenges did your organization face, and are there any lessons learned that you want to share with our listeners? I'm just kind of putting you all on the spot. Anybody wants to grab that question? Challenges that you faced and lessons learned along the way while you were implementing these digital equity tools.
Yeah, I'll start. I'll say when we started our digital equity efforts in 2020, one of the challenges we faced was the generational buy-in. The idea that tech isn't going away, and really convincing some of our community members that learning digital skills and having internet at home and access to a device truly is a need, be it a young person that is in school, a student for their support, or even quite a number of things that have since the pandemic happened, gone online and aren't going back in person. So I think that buy-in from a lot of our community members that hadn't ever had internet at home or seen a need to have it.
Thank you. Thanks, Agnes. Yep, I see Latasha coming off. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to amplify something that Agnes said earlier. And I think a challenge that we often face is the mindset that the digital divide is not real, and it's still very real. Like when we look at our global landscape, we think just because everyone has access to an iPhone, that everyone has access to internet or access, and it's just not true, especially for the communities that we serve. And so if we start there and think about like how we can ensure that people have equal access, then we can move to the next step to ensure that the outcomes are also equal and that they're using that access to not only level the playing field for their own life, but to thrive.
And I would just add one of the things, again, we talk a lot about going back into the pandemic stage. And one of the lessons that we learned was that we had to make sure that the content that we had was universal for the communities that we were serving. So we've created editions for our Native services, which service our Native Americans and beyond. And so there are things that are maybe particular to that community as well as to our military community that may not be applicable to the regular or everyday citizen. And so we've had to really make sure that we have access to them in the way that they need it. Additionally, as I talked about with some of the videos that we had, we needed to add on closed captionings or the opportunity for closed captioning, because again, just because I'm using a computer doesn't mean that, I can possibly hear, or maybe I'm deaf or any of those things. How do we make sure that everyone has equal access? And so we've made those changes as we moved along as well.
Great. Thanks, folks. Just got another question in here from a listener or an attendee. Are any of you aware of education program models for different levels of user knowledge? Which I think is a great question. Thinking about, different skill levels, entry, so please take it away. Education program models for different levels of user knowledge.
I don't know if I can speak to a specific education model, but one of the things that we do internally at the national office, as well as practice with many of our clubs, is the 70-20-10 rule. That 70% of what's being learned, and even by those that are maybe stepping into technology, can be learned on the job. And then 20% from peer-to-peer and 10% outside learning. So those are the things that we try to practice, because there are often times when we're working in clubs and maybe someone was just kind of placed, we're going to place you in the technology room, and maybe they don't have that experience. So who can be the champion that can help that individual learn and maybe provide different trainings or opportunities that we have?
Another question, another kind of bucket that I'm seeing in the comments and questions is around student engagement with their academics and their curriculars. So have any of you seen, examples of the impact of the toolkit and how that shows up in students' academic achievement or their engagement with extracurriculars? Yeah, please. I see some of you nodding. So let's hear it. Let's hear about some. So let's hear about the impact that you've seen.
Yeah, I would say on the City Year side, when we introduce students to an hour of code or different online games and enrichment, we find that it increases and impacts their academic development, especially in math and English language arts. When kids are having fun, they don't even realize that they're learning a thing. right? And one of the things that we talk to our core members about is when you're doing, like say an online coding activity, right? Think about your student's reading level. But when the student is like having to read instructions to learn something, they're learning that like I'm reading out loud, I'm learning how to apply what they're asking me to do to what I'm actually doing. And in that way, I'm learning critical thinking. I'm learning how to apply things. I'm learning, the context to clues in the text. And so, the work we do in the classroom is great, but these like academic enrichment opportunities influence and impact their academic development. So they're able to leverage what they're learning in the classroom with the enrichment that they're doing with our student success coaches in after school or in a coding club. So that's an example of how we see academic development and the digital literacy space.
That's great. Thank you. Agnes or Chase, anything before I move on to another question? Wanted to hear from you all.
I'll say that just to add in the tech hubs that we put into some of our locations, for us, we've seen it fit a need that we previously at the Y were not servicing. The Y oftentimes was pulling people in for gym and swim, right? And that physical activity. And so the recognition that not all young people are interested in that being their out of school time or out of classroom time activity has brought those young people that previously didn't feel that Y was a place for them because that wasn't what their interests into a space that is for them. And so we lean into our young people to help us figure out what they want in this space. Do you want coding clubs? Do you want STEAM clubs? Do you, what do you want to learn about? What do you want to see about? So a lot of, goal setting and surveying to make sure we're then meeting what our communities want to see in the spaces. So really helped to wrap in young people that we previously weren't seeing come through our doors and give them a space where they felt like they belong.
And just to close that out, one of the things that we really understood is that reaching our teens is the connection to the next piece for their futures, for careers, opportunity, et cetera. And so this past year, we've now launched our T3 or Total Teen Takeover, which is an opportunity for us to infuse our tweens as they're starting to become teens, as well as really putting an impact and a focus on our teens and what they need. And one of those big pieces is digital literacy, digital equity, and what do they need? And helping our clubs as well as staffs embrace that technology is here. And maybe it's not always that we need to take their phone or laptop away or it needs to be put away, because for those youth to want to be a part of what we have to offer, we also need to step up and embrace where they're learning and the way that they're learning. And so you'll see many of our clubs will have an Instagram page or a Facebook or a Snapchat, and they allow their youth to be a part of that or maybe even own it for a time frame. And so we've started developing content and concepts for those things as well to, again, reach our youth where they are.
Oh, I love that answer. Rather than kind of banning electronics or banning technical devices, it's like using it in a inclusive way. So some of our listeners or attendees from who are specifically part of the EALA verse or the Educating All Learners Alliance universe, we're specifically, we're very interested in supporting students with disabilities, supporting students with learning differences. Can any of you kind of speak to that a little bit more specifically? We know that when you're creating accessibility and equity, it reaches all students. But is there anything you can kind of specifically say to our students with disabilities and our folks who learn differently, and how these programs are supporting them?
Many of our programs are designed to be either at your pace or where an instructor can take the time to break down different components at a certain point in time. But if an individual was to go on and use any of our programs that I was mentioning from My Future, they're created for your own pace. And so, as I said, there's the reading tools that are on there, or there's the captions that can be utilized, which does make it very much more accessible for someone who may have some opportunities that they would like to slow down or take it at their own pace.
I love that. And I wanted to kind of building off of that idea and some of the things that we were just talking about. So now looking at where you are, what you've learned, are there programs now that you realize might be necessary to implement, anything about let me try to phrase this right. Let me look directly at the notes here from the chat. Are there any programs that you realize were necessary after implementing the digital equity toolkit? Are there maybe places that you're going to go back and say, okay, there's maybe a gap here, or a check for understanding there, things that surprised you, and programs that you realized were necessary after this experience?
For us, I wouldn't necessarily connect it directly back to the digital toolkit, but what I would say is just the communication, including the digital toolkit that we've embraced from our youth, and is that not everything has to be broken down as I said, passport to manhood or smart girls, because there's an opportunity for every gender to learn from those same programs. And so that's one of the reasons why we created our Ultimate Journey program, which is inclusive of everyone in that sense. And so it's a mindset that technology, smart girls can be smart boys as well, and those sorts of things. So, or STEM doesn't just necessarily need to be geared to our young women. How can we make sure that everybody has those accessibility opportunities?
That's fantastic. Yes, go ahead.
I'll say at City Year, what we've learned is leveraging the power of relationships in the digital activities that we do with our students. Not everything on a computer or anything that they're learning has to only be an individual sport, but how we can lean into that social emotional development, teamwork, and that near peer relationships that they have with core members and with their peers to also booster what they're learning. I think sometimes when we think about digital inclusion, we're just thinking about one kid at a time. Like, what does each student need versus how can we meet the broader needs of the community through this thing, and how we can create opportunities for doing things as a team, or opportunities for community in that also.
And I'll wrap it up by saying that digital literacy isn't linear. I think that oftentimes we think there's a step 1, a step 2, then you move to 3 and 4, and yeah, like on and on. What we found very early on is that everybody's coming in at a different level of knowledge. Everyone is coming in with a different end goal, or trying to figure out what that goal is. And so just being able to support in whatever need that learner is coming in with we've had to keep very open-minded about that there's not that in a world where that seems to feel very structured or have a step process, we have to acknowledge that there's not always a step 1 to step 2. It could be a step 1 to step 7. I'll also say we leaned into a lot of reverse mentorship relationships as well, because the divide also we see showing up in our older generations. And so our young people are some of the best educators of our older generations, and vice versa, right? So that has been, a really a great way to empower young people from any skill set that they might be able to teach or might be confident in. So a lot of success in that as well, in our spaces.
Thank you all so much for taking these questions on the fly. Thank you to everybody who was attending and in the chat who dropped these questions. With 1 minute left in this segment. I would love to do a very quick whip around with our panelists. What's the best way to stay involved or get informed about the upcoming work at your organizations?
I would suggest that you go to our website, cityyear.org, and then also see all of the great work that our sites across the country are doing. They all have social media handles. And so they're always posting what our AmeriCorps members are doing with students in their school community. So that's the best way to stay connected with us.
Great.
I would say similarly, the website, I know they were dropped in the chat early on. Maybe they could get redropped in case they've been cycled up. But there's a whole digital equity section that speaks about the work we're doing. And then, and of course, the social media as well. So similarly to Latasha, check out the socials.
And not to be a broken record, but very similar. Please visit us at bgca.org. That is our home website. And then from there, we can also direct to any of our local clubs and their sites. But with that, we do have a digital equity section on our website that links to those few programs that I talked about in the digital space. And of course, we have our handles on Instagram as well, and Facebook and LinkedIn. And so any of us are more than willing, if a message is sent, to respond back and provide some information.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I turn it back over to Jackie and Erin Faye and Caitlin to bring it home.
Awesome. Thank you, panelists. That was a beautiful Q&A, beautiful explanation to everything you're doing. We're so thankful and grateful that you're here to share your work with us. So we're going to move over to the closing part of this presentation. So Caitlin, if you'd like to explain NPSS resources and how people can stay in touch with you.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Erin Faye. I'll just reiterate that we'd love to, have folks get and remain involved. There's a number of ways to do that. Check out our website where we're posting a lot of these resources that folks have been talking about today, including our toolkit. Join us as a supporting champion to sort of continue to move the work forward. We offer no-cost technical assistance to schools and districts and organizations and institutions across the country interested in learning more or improving practice. And we also have a newsletter that we send out regularly that folks can sign up and read. And I just want to sort of echo appreciation for our panelists today, talking about the great work that they and their teams are leading for young people across the country. And, I think the thread that weaves it all together was spoken about so beautifully, the power of relationships and how trusted adults in communities can just support students in so many ways. So grateful to you all and all the work that you and your organizations are doing.
Thank you, Caitlin. Piggybacking off of that, stay updated with Project Unicorn. If you want to learn more about interoperability, what that means, what that is, check us out at projectunicorn.org. We have a very expansive resource database with a multitude of articles where you can learn more about EdTech and interoperability. We also have our recently published State of the Sector report, which analyzes K-12 school system capabilities and infrastructure for leveraging education data, which is also based off of our school system data survey. So if you want to check that out, you can follow us and subscribe also at projectunicorn.com. And I'll hand over to Jackie.
Thanks, Erin Faye. And to stay in touch with the Educating All Learners Alliance, you can head over to our website at educatingalllearners.org. We also have a newsletter that goes out bi-weekly. So if you're interested in seeing our updates for our latest resources, webinars, podcasts, grants, you can head over to our website, sign up there. And you can also follow us on Twitter at educateall_org. Or X. It is not Twitter anymore. X. I need to keep that in my head. And then if you have any resources or tech tools, accessible tech tools that you'd like to share with me, you can reach me at jackie@innovateedunyc.org. And if you're interested in joining the Alliance, you can email Aurora Dreger at aurora@innovateedu.org. And we will be sending this presentation out We do have a free resource library and then a free accessible tech tool library. So if you are interested, these images are hyperlinked to our website. So like I said, we will be sending this out so everybody will have a copy of the presentation.
Thank you for that, Jackie. Again, we want to give one big thank you to our panelists for joining us today and just sharing everything about their organizations in the Digital Equity Toolkit. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you to our attendees for taking the time out of your schedule to join us and be here with us today and for us to learn together. We hope this webinar has been informative, address any questions you may have, and its role in addressing digital equity for different types of organizations as well. I just want to say enjoy the rest of your day and happy holidays.